think a lot of consumers see the energy sector holistically as the enemy, and they don't trust them. They're just out there to get you. They're just out there to screw you and make as much money out of you as you can.
You can get stung. You can get locked into bad deals, bad contracts, which actually put you worse off.
Yep. Here with Australian standards, they kind of actually look at the lowest threshold for electrical safety.
Why do you think that they would consider a SolarEdge battery as opposed to, say, what is arguably the industry leader, which would be Tesla Powerwall 3? Okay, well, I'm here with James Sturch today from SolarEdge. Now, James, thanks for coming in. Now, do you want to give me a quick rundown on who you are and what your experience is in the industry?
Yeah, sure. How far back do you want me to go?
Oh, let's just do a quick summary. You got 60 seconds.
60 seconds, okay. Right, elevator pitch. All right, so I've been in the industry here since there's about 20,000 residential rooftop PV systems. So put it like that, that's about 15 years ago. So I've experienced the whole transition to where we are now with about 4 million residential rooftop systems. I've been with SolarEdge now for 4 years. I look after all of our product development, product integration, testing, and policy regulation, that kind of stuff. So I'm very actively involved within the industry. I sit on 3 different Standards Australia committees, an IEC mirror committee. I'm the chair of the Clean Energy Council Distributed Energy Directorate. I sit on the Distributed Energy Leadership Forum, and I work with a lot of the other industry organisations, networks and regulators and things to help sort of develop the industry and help the transition that we need to look at.
Yeah, wow, that's quite a resume. That's very, very impressive right there from the start of the industry. That's great. Yeah, so I have a lot of questions around SolarEdge, so we wanted to kind of focus on that as a point of conversation today. Now, SolarEdge is a really good inverter manufacturer, I think, and they're branching out into other things. It has been controversial over the years, and we'll get into that later. We'll dive into the details of that. But why do you think a homeowner out there would consider SolarEdge over a different string inverter or something like that, or the SolarEdge ecosystem, let's say? What are the key benefits, you think, on a high level?
At a high level, you've got to understand what is a consumer looking for. And fundamentally, at the moment, the primary reason to put a solar system is to reduce their bills. And the most efficient thing they can do is self-consume as much energy as possible. So, if you think about it, exporting energy back to the grid is the worst financial outcome for a system, even if you're part of a VPP at the moment. So what SolarEdge has is a system which, at a fundamental level of just PV only, is the most efficient system of all the systems out there. And then when you start adding different appliances and devices, whether it's batteries, EV chargers, hot water controllers, load converters and load management devices like that, they are also the most efficient, and it's the most efficient ecosystem to be able to maximize self-sufficiency, self-consumption. If you think about, again, just at that basic level of what sets SolarEdge different to a string inverter, it's really the way in which we harvest energy. So a string inverter, most will have 2, some now have got 3 maximum power point trackers. So that's the way in which the inverter tracks the modulating or the changing output of panels, because of the different characteristics of light and the environment, and it tries to get as much out of those panels as possible. But they're limited by the fact they will only look at the outcome of a string, so a series connection of panels. What SolarEdge does is we've split that process of the inverter, so we've got the maximum power point tracking bit, and then the bit that converts the DC to the AC. They're 2 separate functions of the product. So the maximum power point tracking bit, they are the optimizers which sit underneath each one of the panels. So what we have, instead of, let's say, on a 10 kilowatt system, you might have, on a string system, you have, let's say, two MPPTs. On a solar system, you have 30. So what that means is we have the ability to be able to maximize the output of every single panel. And panels don't do the same thing. So although you might think, well, I've got a roof that's full of, 400 watt panels, they'll all be outputting 400 watts. They don't. And they don't for a series of reasons. Firstly, just for the manufacturing process of a panel, you have what's known as module mismatch, and they all output plus or minus 5%, let's say. Some are 3, some are 5%. So they don't all output 400. They'll all be a little bit different. In a string system, they'll all be sort of regulated down to the lowest common denominator in terms of output. But with our system, we can allow each panel through the optimizer to give us as much as it can at any given time. You also then get the other characteristics of light, the fact you get shade, and you also get characteristics due to temperature. The temperature coefficients of panels will also restrict or change the output characteristics of a panel. So with SolarEdge, we have the ability to basically be able to say to each panel, give us everything you've got. Whereas with a string system, you're limited by the fact that you can only sort of grab the average output across the entire string. So typically what we're seeing with our systems is anywhere between 6 to 10% more yield than you would a string system because of our ability to be able to harvest as much of that potential energy as possible.
That's a really good explanation. Yeah, I think with that extra, 9-10%, whatever, at the end of the year, that really does add up. And yeah, I think that's a good point that you make that, look, a lot of people when they're buying solar, they forget that they need to be really outcome driven. Like, what are you actually trying to achieve? And I guess for most people, what they're trying to achieve is as much energy as possible. And yeah, you were saying with the DC architecture, we can achieve that. What I like about SolarEdge is a lot of the connections are on the DC side, as opposed to other systems that we work with, like AC coupled batteries, which I really like AC coupled batteries from an installer's perspective because they can be nice and easy just to bang whatever onto the switchboard and match up whatever is there. But yeah, you're right. If you're sticking on the DC side and the DC is coming from the solar and going directly into the battery and it's not having to convert from AC to DC and back and forth, the efficiency is going to be a lot higher and the outcome is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, and look, I'd actually argue it's easier to install because you don't have to do anything in the switchboard.
Yeah. Well, the reason that I say AC coupled are easier to install is because often we're actually doing retrofit batteries.
Yeah, sure.
So in that instance, it's probably a bit more flexible. But yeah, I think if you're doing a new install, then yeah, I think the DC battery is easier. But I try not to think about that too much. I try and think from a homeowner's perspective as to they don't really care how hard it is to install unless it's going to blow the cost of the installation out. What they care about is the outcome at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, and tell me more about the power optimizers and how they work. How do they benefit a customer or a homeowner that has shading issues? And second to that question, why would you recommend power optimizers for someone who doesn't have shading issues?
So shade is one of the things that we always used to get pigeonholed in, that, SolarEdge is the shade solution. And shade is just one characteristic of module mismatch. Module mismatch, as I just explained, is fundamentally you've got three things. You've got the varying outputs of panels because no two panels are the same. You've got varying outputs due to temperature, and you've got the varying outputs for other environmental characteristics such as shade. And what we then do is have the ability to be able to almost ignore those and just, like I said before, say to the panel, give us everything you've got. There are companies out there which talk about shade solutions and algorithms and things which try to boost the output of the panels to mitigate the effects of shade. But at the end of the day, it'll always have a parasitic effect if you're looking at a string system, because there'll be panels which are unequal in terms of output. So therefore, if you're trying to push energy from panels which are unshaded through a panel which is shaded, you'll have a certain element of resistance. And doesn't matter what you do with an algorithm, you can't offset that resistance, and you'll get additional losses, not just the loss of the unperforming or the lower performing panel, you'd also get losses due to the fact that you've got this resistance from that panel. But with SolarEdge, each panel works independently. Even if a panel is smashed or broken, or you've got the input connector, let's say it's got a faulty connection and you've got nothing coming out of the panel. With a solar system, you're only losing the output of that one panel. If that was a string system, you'd lose the entire array. And that is huge because often, there could be a storm. You might not even know, you might not be home. You might not know that there's been hail damage or a branch has broken something. Some damage has occurred on your roof you don't know, or a homeowner doesn't know about. The first time they know their inverter isn't working is probably when they get their next bill. And they'll find that actually their bill's just gone through the roof because all that production they thought they had, they didn't, because the system's been offline. With SolarEdge system, we can isolate those issues because it's just going to affect that one panel. And secondly, as soon as that happens, we can pinpoint that issue exactly where it is on the roof. We will get an alert, the installer will get an alert, and it can just be dealt with proactively. It's not a retrospective, we've now got to go fault finding and try to find this issue. You've also then got other inherent benefits to the consumer, such as the way in which we can create the safest system that's out there. So, for instance, one of the biggest issues you'll get, like the worst case scenario is you get a fire. Okay, you've got a connection issue, which can then create an arc, which will then create a flame, and it will burn. You get a self-sustaining fueled fire situation because the fuel is coming from the energy, which is coming from the solar panels. So if you've got a broken connection, you've got the sun is energizing the panels, it will self-sustain and fuel the fire. So what we do is we look at it differently. We look at the characteristics of situations that would cause an arc. So we have temperature sensors in each one of the connectors of our optimizers. As soon as the temperature reaches 80 degrees, it'll trigger an alert and shut the optimizer off. So we actually look at the precursor for an arc. Now again, there's other companies which say, it's fine, we've got arc detection.
Prevent it from happening altogether.
Yep, but it doesn't, and they can't. I mean, they can in some certain situations, because what they can do is they can literally sort of create an open circuit scenario, go, okay, we've detected an arc, let's switch off the array and turn it into open circuit so power isn't flowing through the circuit and it won't sustain, which is fine if that broken cable is within the circuit returning to the inverter. If you've got a broken cable that's earthing, let's say, to a metal roof, you've got a circuit that the inverter cannot turn off, and the arc will just keep going and it will keep burning and burning and burning. Where, again, with our system, you don't have that issue. And also you've got the rapid shutdown. So you can turn the DC isolator off on the inverter, and within, I think it's 4 seconds, you'll have the DC on the roof will be less than 30 volts.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually heard this week, a homeowner in Queensland tried to get up on a tin roof, and they actually got an electric shock off the tin roof. And when they investigated it, it was because the solar wasn't earthed properly. Mm. It was a DC system installed by some cowboys, I think. And yeah, what you're saying about the panels is, I'll give some more examples of things I've seen over the years as an installer. But I remember going to a house once, and I think a panel had been hit by a tree branch or a golf ball or something had fallen down and smashed this panel. And now this was visible from the street, so the homeowner knew, so they called us out to have a look at it. And when we went and looked at the inverter, it was still producing power somewhat okay, probably not performing as well as it could. But had this panel not been visible from the front of the house, they wouldn't have actually known.
Yeah.
They would have had no way of knowing that there was a smashed panel on their roof, and it could have been there for years. And not only they're missing out on money, but who knows what hazards that causes.
It doesn't even need to be as bad as that. It could literally be, you don't get it so much now with Topcon modules like glass and glass, but panels which have still got a backing sheet on them, if they're not installed carefully and you get a scratch on that backing sheet, then that will introduce condensation and you'll get corrosion, which will then in time turn to arcing and actually turn to degradation of the panel. You don't see that from the front because that's all at the back. And again, the system will be working and operating, but you could literally be getting little arcs on the panels, which they just get worse and worse and worse, because as you get the arc, you get carbon build up around it, which then means you need higher levels of fuel or more energy to be able to bridge that resistance, which means the arc gets bigger, it gets hotter, and eventually you'll get to the situation where, like anything, it will burn. And that's really not a good outcome from a homeowner.
It's really interesting when you compare the Australian solar industry to the American solar industry, and they have regulations there around rapid shutdown being mandatory. And I believe Enphase and SolarEdge pretty much own the market over there. Yeah. Whereas in Australia, I don't want to talk down, but I would say Enphase and SolarEdge are maybe a little bit more niche than they are, comparatively to the fact that they own their market in America is pretty crazy when you even think of it that way. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how, I guess, different perspectives or how different people see it, where, in America, a string system is just flat out not allowed.
So, yeah, what you got to understand is the regulation framework here. So what installers can do is governed by the regulation, which primarily comes from Australian standards. And Australian standards, it's very rare for Australian standards to create a new standard in Australia just for Australia. They tend to replicate bits of other standards which have already been adopted. And primarily they look at IEC standards, European standards. They don't tend to look at UL standards, the American standards. So it's been very difficult to get something like rapid shutdown adopted here. It's actually adopted now in 16 different countries around the world. And there is on the cards an IEC version of rapid shutdown. And so as soon as it becomes an IEC standard, you'd expect actually it will be adopted in Australia. So it will happen here because it's just so much common sense. But what governs what can be installed in America is the firefighters. So it actually comes from the fire authorities because they're the ones that give literally the okay for what can be installed on a property. And they look at it from a risk perspective and a fire risk perspective. Here you don't get it. Here with Australian standards, they kind of actually look at the lowest threshold for electrical safety. They don't go with the upper threshold. So it's all about managing risk, but at a way in which can be easily adopted and understood.
Yeah, look, it's interesting when we talk about regulations and stuff because America is crazy at the moment. You look at Elon Musk bringing in the Department of Government Efficiency, which is essentially one of their core goals is to deregulate a lot of the country to a degree. They reckon they can get away with 80% of the government. So it'll be interesting to see if any of that applies to the renewable energy industry in America, if there's any rules that they decide to relax on or if there's anything they stick with. Because there was a bit of talk in the industry around the Tesla Powerwall 3 when that was released very recently in America, because that's technically a DC system. I believe they've built some kind of rapid shutdown into the inverter, but there was a lot of talk around, basically everything had to be Enphase or SolarEdge in America, and then all of a sudden Powerwall 3 comes out with the DC connected directly to the hybrid inverter, directly above the battery. And we had a firefighter come down from America, Captain Richard Burt from the Las Vegas Fire Rescue, and he was skeptical of it because he believes that the fires are started with solar systems at the DC connection points. And he did not think it was a good idea to have a DC connection point directly above a battery, which could then go up in flames if there was any arc fault there.
Yeah. I mean, what they actually require is additional components on the roof for their rapid shutdown, which is the same as pretty much every string inverter manufacturer out there. They all do operate in America, and they all do have rapid shutdown devices because you can apply additional hardware to the roof. What
is that like power optimizers or something?
No, they're literally like devices which will cut off power. They're almost like contactors which go on the strings on the roof. The benefit that architecture such as SolarEdge and Enphase have is that it's native due to the way in which we control the bus. So we don't need the additional hardware.
I get skeptical of putting more things on the roof. Like that's one of the arguments against this is the more things you put on the roof, and some people would say optimizers is potentially more points of failure. You put 30 optimizers on the roof is potentially 30 extra points of failure, although it is 30 extra points of protection on the flip side of that. So yeah, like it just depends on what side of that argument you take. But I've definitely heard a lot of people that argue against SolarEdge. Often people in the industry, for whatever reason, they may have a bias against it for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely more points of redundancy because you're not going to get the situation where 35 optimizers will fail. You might get one fails or one connection that could fail, which would trip an optimizer. If you get one connection failed on a string system, you'll lose the entire string or potentially the array. And also you look at the fact that our optimizers got 25-year warranties on them. They are designed for that environment. They're designed to do that job. And the failure rates of the optimizers are like fractions of a percent. So
in regards to failure rates, we'll just touch on that then quickly. I talk to Enphase a lot, obviously, and Enphase, funny, like I said, you talk about biases. Enphase obviously have a bias, but one of the things that people from that camp might say is that although SolarEdge has power optimizers, which is great, it still maintains a single point of failure being the inverter. So what is your thoughts on that, and what happens in the event of if there is an inverter failure? Is it likely, and how quickly do we get that rectified?
Every system has a single point of failure, which is the inverter. For Envoys, it's the Envoy. They all do. And that's not unique. I mean, with us, again, you separate the two. So you've got the optimizers, and like I said before, you've got huge amounts of redundancy because of the way they operate. And they've got 25-year warranty. Our inverters have got the highest warranty of any inverter, and they've got a 12-year warranty. Everyone else is 10, and then you can extend them from there. our inverters, they've been through, like all products in this industry, they've evolved and they've developed over time because the industry has just grown at such an unprecedented rate. You know, innovation has had to learn and adapt as we've grown. And where we are currently sitting with our inverters, the current generation, we've got less than 0.5% failure rate. So we've learned a lot, and we've really enhanced and developed our products. And you know, that comes from the fact that we've literally just got so much product out there.
What I found was really interesting is I got invited to the SolarEdge HQ in Melbourne, and they took me up in the city. It was a really nice building. They had a screen up on the wall, and they had some KPIs there and a clock that was ticking. And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, we track how long it takes us to get back to people for service calls, service issues. That's a KPI that we track." And it seemed to be one of the key KPIs that the company was tracking. They weren't necessarily tracking how many sales have we made today. They were tracking how quickly are we fixing issues today, which I was really impressed by, because a lot of people don't think about that. Yeah. And that seemed to be something that SolarEdge valued, from my opinion, when I went to the office.
Absolutely. I mean, the relationship we have with installers is, and how we support them because look, everything's fine when everything's fine. Okay, yeah. Everyone's happy when it's all going well. It's the experience you have when it doesn't go well that really counts and really matters. And the relationship we have with our installers now is absolutely fantastic, because we put so much effort on that process to support them, the process to answer their calls quickly, the process to automate a lot of the processes, to get a replacement inverter, or have a chat function that they can just speak to someone directly through the app. They don't have to get on the phone. So yeah, it's something that we take really seriously, and it's one of the areas of the business that, to be honest, we probably invest more time and resources on than anything else at the moment.
I'll give you another example of times where SolarEdge has really impressed me. So just on Friday, so for those listening, I don't know when you're listening to this, but it's Wednesday today. So I actually had an issue with a SolarEdge inverter on Friday. It's very rare, but I had one. The customer said, "There's an issue with this." I said, "No worries, let me contact SolarEdge, I'll get it sorted for you." So he texted me on Tuesday. So we lodged the RMI on Friday, and he texted me on Tuesday to say, "The inverter's here, come back, let's swap it over."
Yep.
So basically 2 business days.
Yes.
So that's incredible.
And in addition to that, see, if you use like the auto RMA function, you can actually get paid. You can get the rebate that installers get to go and do that swap before you've even gone to site.
That's good. I should follow that up right
now.
Yeah,
do follow up.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I want to ask you some questions around the SolarEdge battery. So the batteries, I think it's been on the market for a year or two now, actually. It's been around. I'm always a little bit hesitant with new products that come to the market. I was not the first person to jump on the battery, but now we have jumped on the battery. And yeah, we seem to be having great success with it so far. So tell me, I want to ask a specific question. I want to know a bit about the battery, and I want to know, our best-selling battery at the moment is Tesla Powerwall 3. So if a customer was looking at a SolarEdge battery instead, why do you think that they would consider a SolarEdge battery as opposed to, say, what is arguably the industry leader, which would be Tesla Powerwall 3?
So firstly, again, coming back to that initial point of why is a customer putting in a system, it's all about self-consumption primarily, and getting as much out of the system as possible. So the SolarEdge system is the most efficient. It's about 94.5% efficient. If you think of production going through a full round trip of the battery, so full charge, full discharge, out through the inverter, it's about 94.5% efficient. Powerwall 3 is about 86.5%. So you get more out of the SolarEdge system, and that can equate to over 35 days more production per year on a SolarEdge system than you would with something Powerwall 3.
13 months a year.
Exactly. And that's when, consumers are really finding it, tough and really trying to manage their bills. That is a big deal. It's a really big deal.
What about the chemistry? I think the new Powerwall's LFP. And what's the chemistry in the SolarEdge battery at the moment?
It's NMC at the moment. We are going to be, with the next generation batteries, going to LFP. But it's NMC, but what we have is a product which, unlike other companies out there, which they tend to use off-the-shelf, 48-volt rack-mounted modules and build them into their enclosures and all the rest of it. We built the battery ourselves, and it's designed to work at the 400 volts bus voltage that is on the SolarEdge systems. And within that, we have built a huge amount of redundancy and safety mechanisms and safety measures to ensure that it is as safe as any other product out there. And also, it's got to meet Australian standards. It's got to be installed as per 5139 and, the rest of it. So the fact it's NMC versus LFP is kind of, almost academic at the moment.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it SolarEdge that had a fire extinguisher built in at some point?
The first generation. Well, when we first released the product, it had an inbuilt fire extinguisher. That was there because at that time there was changes with the UL certification in America, and as a way to basically ensure that we got certification, we put in this sort of, again, redundancy. We put in a fire extinguisher to make sure that we weren't going to get any problems with being able to hit our timeline in terms of releasing the product. But once the certification came through, it was realised that was just surplus to requirements. So we removed it as a cost-saving measure because it wasn't needed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, look, that makes sense. It's not really needed. I like to give real-world examples of things that I've actually seen. That's why I've mentioned a few examples of things that I've seen with my own eyes. And I haven't, with my own eyes, in this industry experience where I see a lot of things in the industry, and I know a lot of people. I'm in a lot of groups. I haven't seen any batteries catch on fire in Australia. Oh no, I lie. Actually, not since the LG recall.
Yes,
that's in the past now.
Yeah, so that's history.
Yeah. No, we're very much separate to that. So I get a lot of questions from customers and people that come to our workshops, and they ask a lot about VPPs. In particular, there's a lot of interest around amber at the moment and trading energy on the energy market from their battery. So can you explain to me, is the SolarEdge ecosystem with the battery compatible with amber, and what are the benefits of that?
Yeah, it's compatible with amber as well as a whole range of other different VPP providers. We have all the necessary remote API interface that is required for any aggregator. And there's no real restriction in terms of throughput or, control.
Yeah, because there seems to be a lot of people asking about that at the moment, actually. Yeah, actually, we've got one customer. He's got 10 kilowatts, so 20 kilowatt hours of storage, and he's looking at amber at the moment with the SolarEdge batteries. So that'll be really good as a case study to see how he goes. Do you have any examples of people on amber that you've had any feedback from them? Do you work directly with people on amber, or have you spoken to them directly to hear what they have to say 3-6 months in, or?
I've had to look at a few sites which are on amber to look at the profiles and look at when the systems are under control. And from that, I can ascertain that there must be quite considerable benefits going to the consumer, looking at the way in which it's being controlled.
Okay.
But I haven't actually had any direct dialogue with homeowners, no.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of people, they just go back to the ROI. What's the ROI? And amber seems to offer better ROI. But then a lot of people, they look me point blank in the eyes and they're like, what's the number? What's the number per year? And I go, well, it's really difficult to explain that because there's so many variables, and particularly with amber, you kind of like trading energy on the stock market. So I like to draw it back to the stock market and saying, well, if you buy stocks in this company at this time, when are you going to get your ROI? It's like, well, who knows? Yeah, it might blow you away.
It's kind of like glorified gambling, really.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And I suppose though it's a hedge. So with someone like amber, because you don't have to have amber controlling the system all the time, you can kind of opt in and opt out via your app. It is a hedge. You've got it if you want it. If it's going to make sense at a given time, great, go for it. If not, don't. So what I like about that business model is it does give more agency to the consumer.
Yeah, I have heard of instances where part of the grid has gone down in a storm, and then the spot price of energy has gone up to $100 a kilowatt hour very briefly. So people have been able to discharge their battery only for about an hour, but they discharge a couple kilowatts to the grid, make $300.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that like it's something that happens every day, because it's probably something that might happen once every 2 or 3 years, but it is something that can happen. And if you're an opportunistic person, you are in a position to make a profit off that battery at that point in time.
Yeah, again, it's like a hedge. You just, why not, is the way that I look at it. You know, there's no real downside.
Yeah. What about the SolarEdge ecosystem and essentially like home energy management systems? So does the SolarEdge inverter or the Energy Hub have the ability to control different loads like air cons and hot water and car charging?
Yeah, so the thing you get with a home hub inverter is that it is a home energy management system in itself. It's native to the device. So we have our own communication protocol called EnergyNet, and that is based on mobile phone technology. So it's a very, very high speed and robust, what you call a mesh network communication protocol. So it's not point to point. So the more devices you got, the quicker you get communication through your devices. And that can communicate, it communicates with the batteries, it communicates with our hot water controllers and all of our load controllers. We also got EV chargers as well. And what that means, we've got two different types of controllers. One is literally a load controller is what we call it. So that can be used for large loads, because that will turn on relays, which can then turn on larger contactors. So for that, you can control the power through heavier loads, but you can also use that to control the DRM ports in things like heat pumps and air conditioning units and things like that. So excess power can be used to control those. And then we've got a smart switch, which can then control loads directly. And the nice thing about the smart switch is it's got a meter inside it, so you can actually see exactly how much power that device is using, which is quite a cool way to do it. So yeah, you can create a complete smart home system with the SolarEdge ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I've found in SolarEdge in the past, and let's say I'm going back about 5 years here, is that the product from an installer's perspective can be quite technical. It can be technical to install. Now, I've spoken to a few people within the SolarEdge camp recently, and they've actually told me that they're trying to simplify and streamline the process for installers and for homeowners by actually getting rid of the different inverter sizes, getting rid of the 5s and the 8s, and just having a 10 kilowatt energy hub. And that would be for all different sizes of systems, anything, 3 kilowatt up to, I think, up to 20 kilowatt, depending if you've got a battery, you can oversize it.
Yep.
So basically, if you guys are moving towards a 10 kilowatt energy hub, what's the thoughts behind that, and how can that benefit a homeowner?
So the first way it benefits a homeowner is it creates a cheaper product fundamentally, because what it does is there's a huge economic saving within the supply chain. So not specifically our supply chain, it's the market supply chain. So all of the warehousing for our distributors and our customers, they've only now got to stock one product. So there's a huge saving there. When it gets to the homeowner, what's unique about the SolarEdge 10 kilowatt inverter, let's say, is that, yeah, as you said, you can put an array as low as 3 kilowatts onto it, and the inverter still operates at its maximum efficiency. Because we're controlling the DC bus, we will run at the same level of efficiency of the inverter, regardless of whether it's a 3 kilowatt array or it's a 22 kilowatt array. You can't do that with the string system. You can't really put a 3 kilowatt array on a 10 kilowatt string inverter and hope to get an efficient outcome. The inverter will struggle. It might not even turn on. So what this creates is a unique offering from SolarEdge. And what you then have is this product, which, like I just said, is a full home management system, free, embedded within the product. And it's completely upgradable, because, again, one of the unique things about SolarEdge is that you can add panels to the array down the track. With a string system, if you've got an array, let's say now with 400 watt panels, and in a couple of years' time, panels are 500 watts, if you add a 500 watt panel to an array which is made with 400 watt panels, that 500 watt panel will only ever work at 400 watts. With SolarEdge, that will work at 500 watts. So we can add panels. We can, even if we change out optimizers, they're all backwards compatible, so you can grow that system. So it might start off with a 3 kilowatt system now, simple for a homeowner. In 2 years' time, they want to add batteries, they want to double the size of the array, triple the size of the array, they can. You don't have to change the inverter. You can just grow the system over time.
It's interesting that I'll give you another example of a job we're doing this week. Is I think there was 2 3-phase 8 kilowatt inverters there that me and my team installed back in 2020, and the customer wanted batteries and he wanted extra panels, and we ended up actually replacing the 2 inverters that were there for free with 3 single-phase inverters, and then chucking in 2 batteries, and then we added in an extra 5 panels onto one of the strings. I think he might have had 3 30-watt panels originally, and we just chucked on 4 40-watt panels.
Yep.
S500 optimizers, bang, done.
Yeah.
No worries.
I know.
Full
Super
upgrade.
Easy. Yeah, job done.
Yeah, no sweat.
Yep. Again, that's one of the unique benefits with SolarEdge that homeowners don't need to be worried about. Because it's always one of those things like, a few years ago when batteries were on the horizon, everyone was like setting hybrid ready and backup ready. And,
Yep.
you can, I can remember 10 years ago, everyone was selling 5 kilowatt inverters with 3 kilowatt arrays going, you can add panels to it down the track, or you got a spare MPPT you can add to it. And no one did, because by the time people got to it, panel class had jumped so much, you actually ended up replacing the inverter. But with our system, you can just add to it. You can just keep adding to it, and even put them on different roof faces. It really just doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and a lot of people are looking for that. They're looking for a system they're able to expand. One thing I wanted to talk to you about quickly as well is the SolarEdge, the Genesis inverter. Now, we worked with the Genesis for a bit there. It was okay for some people that were on a bit of a budget, but we did get some complaints at that point in time when we were doing it, because a lot of people thought it was going to come with panel level monitoring, and it didn't. It was an optional extra that I think you paid about $270 for. And the problem is one of SolarEdge's kind of key marketing points at that point in time has always been the panel level visualization. And then when customers didn't get it and then found out they had to pay more, they were disappointed with that at that point in time. Now that was a decision that SolarEdge made, I believe, to kind of be a little bit more entry level with their product to get the cost down. Now, I understand you guys are moving away from the Genesis as part of this move towards a 10 kilowatt energy hub. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yep.
And so with the energy hub, it's basically, how do you say this? I don't know, maybe the Rolls Royce of the inverters. It's got all the features, all the bells and whistles, all the capabilities is there. There's no surprises with that.
It's the universal product. It's got everything in it, even to the extent where it'll be coming with all the other bits that you need. So you'll get the inverter. It'll come with the EnergyNet card for the communication. It's got an inbuilt meter, and it'll come with a CT. It'll come with a Wi-Fi gateway as well, which makes the communication
consumption
easier.
monitoring. Yeah.
Yeah. So it comes with everything, all in the one box. So it is one of the ways in which we're supporting the installers. We're just making the life easy for everyone. It just is universal product.
Yeah, it sounds really good. One thing I wanted to talk about is the manufacturing as well. Now, there's a lot going on in the world geopolitically at the moment. It's kind of crazy, but I'm hearing that SolarEdge is going to move more of their manufacturing, or a large portion of their manufacturing, back to the US from next year. You're going to be manufacturing inverters in the US?
No, we've already been manufacturing for the last quarter.
For the last quarter.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back. So we're back in the US.
We've got two
already.
factories in the US. So all, as of beginning of next year, probably by the time we get through the current stock in the channel, I would have thought at the end of the first quarter, we'll be seeing products, the 10 kilowatt energy hubs, that'll be made in America.
Okay, made in America. Yeah, that's really good. I did see it All Energy, the inverter there with the sticker on it, made in America.
Made in USA,
Yeah. No, it's great to support America. We've got to support someone. Why not America? Maybe it's preferable to some of the other countries. Yeah, but yeah, so I did see that at All Energy. Also at All Energy, I saw there was a new product there. I think it was 102 or 103 kilowatt hour battery.
Yes,
for commercial installations. Yep. And I'm told that it's an AC coupled battery. So anyone who has a commercial property and they've already got a big solar system there, they could add this SolarEdge battery to it. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So it can either be an AC coupled to an existing string system, or it can be installed as part of a SolarEdge system, because if it's part of the SolarEdge system, although it's AC coupled, it can still be managed underneath our SolarEdge 1 for C&I new monitoring and system management platform. And within that, you get building management tools to really be able to help get the most out of the battery. The reason we went for AC coupled is, unlike residential, where predominantly a battery is used for what we call maximising self-consumption, in commercial situations they're often used to manage peak demand. So they do a little bit more AC charging from the grid and then direct discharging to the loads at certain times a day. So that's why we decided to create that style of product, because often with commercial you get the situations where there might not actually be enough rooftop production to have excess enough to store a battery. But a battery is still completely justified and viable from an ROI perspective, even if it's just charging from the grid to do peak demand offset.
Yeah, that's really good, and you're seeing a lot of that now with the big commercial batteries. I think with a commercial battery, it really does make sense because commercial customers that I talk to, ROI is the bottom line.
Yeah.
They're not buying it. They very rarely. Well, some people do it for the environment, but yeah, very rarely they're buying it because it feels good or they want the latest tech. You know, we find some people, they get very emotional around things that involve their home and what they want at their home. Whereas when you're dealing with a business, they're just chucking the numbers on the spreadsheet. And if the numbers, they get a few different quotes or whatever. And if the numbers look good, they say yes. If the numbers look bad, they say no.
It's a business decision. Yeah.
Yeah, which
That's
is
it.
totally makes sense. And, you know, different strokes for different folks, but it definitely makes sense from a commercial perspective. I think then there's a different place in the market for residential. Some people just like maybe how it makes them feel to have a battery at their house, makes them feel good. And if it makes them feel good, that's fine. Other people will say, no, I want the numbers to say this and you can't promise me these numbers, so I don't want a battery. Yep. And if that's the case, then that's fine too.
Yeah. I mean, it also comes with UPS option, so you can do full UPS backup and other features like you have generator input into the UPS for CNI as well. So there are some other redundancy factors which business owners might want to consider. Yeah,
that's definitely priceless for some business owners. I've got one business owner that we work with in Yarraville. I would nearly said Yarra Valley. He's at Yarraville, so just on the west side of Melbourne. It's one of the oldest parts of Melbourne. I know you're not from Melbourne, but over there the grid is really old and it's really unreliable. And he had an architecture firm and he was like, I just don't want blackouts because we get blackouts a couple times a year and they're 4 or 5 hours at a time and my whole business goes down. I've got 8 people in the office. I can't have that.
Yep.
I just need that UPS.
Yeah.
It was really important to him. And he bought 3 batteries from us, and yeah, it cost a lot. Let's say that.
It's one of those things. It's funny though when you think about ROI. How do you put a value against backup?
Well, you can't, and that's the thing, you know. And some people they have medical equipment, and you know, other people, like I said, they're at work. If they lose power at their house, and then even someone, you know, they may have just a small consultancy business. Maybe they charge $100 an hour or something. And power goes down, they lose internet, they can't do the Zoom meeting. Then you know.
Yeah.
How do you quantify it?
You've got, you know, businesses that have got, you know, like chemists that have got fridges with stuff in it that is, you know, they lose power, they've got to bin everything, you know, that kind of stuff. The value on that is insane.
Yeah, it's definitely worth thinking of. So what else have we got? What else have we got to go through here? So where do you see the industry going in the next 5 or 10 years then?
So it's interesting. If you look forward, well, firstly, if you think 2035 is the target for the exit of all remaining coal-fired power stations in Australia. So what does that then look like? And what does that mean then from the transition perspective? Well, if you look at what AEMO are projecting, is a huge uptick from renewables and specifically from the residential sector. So we're currently at about 4 million residential systems with about, I think it's about 160,000 batteries. They reckon there's going to be, I think the target is something like 3.5 million residential batteries. Oh no, 3.5 million people with batteries. That's right, by 2030. Okay, so if you then think of like, how are we going to get from here to there? It's going to be a very interesting roller coaster. I think over the last 3 years, there's been in the region of 40% year-on-year growth of battery uptake. That, to meet AEMO's predictions, has got to jump to 70% year-on-year growth consistent for the next 5-6 years. So what I foresee is a huge focus from government, both federal and state, to support the residential sector because it is so important. Again, if you're thinking in context, there's currently about 25, 26 gigawatts worth of residential production. There's only, I think, about 22.5 gigawatts worth of production from black and brown coal. So already the residential sector is way above the fossil fuels, and that's only going to get more. And it's a really, really important component of the way in which we're going to decarbonise the country. I think what's also going to come along is a lot more reliance and requirement for VPPs. Currently, attachment rates of VPPs is only about 18% of people with batteries. It's very low, although, like we were discussing before, there are some fantastic products and solutions out there for consumers. I think the reason for that is there needs to be more work done on the social license aspect. I think a lot of consumers see the energy sector holistically as the enemy, and they don't trust them, and they don't trust
I've
the industry.
propagated that myth a little bit myself, I hate to say.
Yeah, I mean, but it's true. Like, they're just out there to get you. They're just out there to screw you and make as much money out of you as you
I
can.
don't want to say it's a myth, but yeah, we've definitely we've spread a bit of a virus on the energy retailers being the enemy, and in particular, you talk about VPPs. In the past, I would actually argue against VPPs most of the time because not all VPPs are the same.
Yeah.
And we looked at one yesterday. I won't say who it was, but yeah, it was so much worse for the customer to be on a VPP than not. So you do really need to be careful with VPPs because you can get stung, you can get locked into bad deals, bad contracts, which actually put you worse off.
Yep.
And it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of the people that get solar batteries, they do it because they want independence, and then they sign up to a VPP and they can potentially lose that independence. So that's something that you need to be cognizant of when you're signing up to a VPP. But there are good ones, I think. Like Amber is a good one because they don't really they kind of work for you, I think, more than the other ones. I think a lot of the bigger energy retailers, they sign you up to a VPP because it works for them.
Yeah.
And they make money out of it.
Yeah.
And then they give you a little bit back. But it's so hard to quantify the difference between being on the VPP and not being on the VPP.
At the end of the day, if you look at what is proposed in terms of the transition away from fossil fuels, what is required is a complete change of tact from the way in which the industry is regulated. Consumers need to be put front and centre. And at the moment, they are, to a certain extent, consumers with renewable energy systems are seen as a problem to be fixed and a problem to be managed. And part of that way to manage them is VPPs. It's things like remote control of backstop mechanisms and mandatory flexible exports and all this kind of stuff. And it's not putting them at the front. And if you think of if there's a way in which that true value of the resource that consumers are investing in themselves could be untapped and utilised to change the grid, we could transition faster than the proposals. But unfortunately, we've got an energy system which was designed over 100 years ago with power flowing in one direction and power flowing in sort of two directions, or it's not even going in two directions. It's kind of like mixing around a lot because power that's going out through your inverter is going to your neighbour. They see it as a problem.
Yeah, it's decentralization, which is kind of a buzzword right now, which is, I think it's interesting. And I think that's a lot of the appeal is people want to decentralize. They want to take power back to the people. And you see a lot of these things and a lot of these buzzwords, you see it around like cryptocurrencies, or you see it now around like, X and social media and stuff, as they're trying to decentralize the media. So it's not one point of control. Now, all of a sudden, everyone has a little bit of control, which is what they talk about on X at the moment, is like citizen journalism, where all of a sudden everyone has their own little say. You can decentralize. There's not this one authority that oversees everything, which is definitely the appeal for renewable energy and electrification. But yeah, you can see at the moment they're kind of realizing they're losing their power with, with solar and batteries and a bunch of other things. They're losing a bit of power. Now they're trying to take that power back a little bit so they can regulate it and control it.
Because the thing is, you've got to realise that the consumer's no longer consumers. They're generators, they're participants, and they've got to be treated more equally in that regard.
Yeah. What I find is most interesting about the shift away from fossil fuels as well, and particularly around cars and things where you're burning fossil fuels to generate energy around cars and cooktops and hot water services, is it's an extremely inefficient way to generate energy is by burning fossil fuels. And when you look at, if we electrify everything, the amount of energy that's required to do what we did with fossil fuels is actually only like 30% of the energy that we needed with fossil fuels. So if we can electrify everything, we don't even need as much energy.
Oh, totally. So because it's just so much more efficient.
It's so much more efficient. It's so much better. And even when you put all that stuff aside, like you look at electric cars, and you can argue about whether petrol cars are better than electric cars. But like I get in my electric car, it's like it's instant power. I charge it at home. I charge it for free. Like I don't care about any argument for or against electric cars. I just wouldn't go back because I find electric car to be more convenient.
I think it's like the 80-20 rule with electric cars versus combustion engines. I think about 20% of the energy from fuel in a combustion car is used for motion. Whereas in an
noise
EV,
and heat and
yeah, it all just goes exactly noise, heat, and everything else. Whereas in EVs, it's 80%. It is so much more efficient. And again, if you look at like coal, one of the, I mean, we don't have them now, but you remember the old incandescent light bulbs with the filament?
Yeah.
It was something like the amount of the latent energy in a lump of coal, only 97% of it was wasted. So only 3% of the actual latent energy in the coal was used to emit light in a light bulb. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
It's a horribly inefficient way to generate energy, and energy is what we need to survive. Energy is what keeps us going. It's what keeps the food cold in the fridge. It's what keeps the lights on. It's what gets us moving around.
Yep.
So it's very important that we generate it sustainably and efficiently, and we have the best systems possible. And I think decentralization of energy is going to be the way of the future, I think, and put the power back to the people. Everyone has solar, battery and everything at their house, and electrify everything, as they say. And yeah, I think that's the way for moving forwards.
I think it has to be.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming in. Unless there's anything else you want to touch on quickly, I think we'll leave it at that.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, no worries. All right, that's awesome. Well, thanks, James. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye.